So we're live and we'll just wait for a few attendees to join us and we'll start in a minute.
Perfect.
So I think we should start. Hello everyone, welcome back to DigiBank, the Banking Transformation Summit organized by Khaleej Times. My name is Varsha and I am from Khaleej Times. I hope all the attendees are having a good time attending all the sessions. Well, moving on to the next session for today, we have the topic for the next session would be open banking, driving value and transforming banks in digital powerhouses. And our speaker for today is Mr. Carlos Teixeira. He's a global industry principal at Finastra with a prime focus on corporate banking. Carlos brings more than 25 years of experience in transaction banking to his role, including 11 years spent with major European banks in their transaction banking division. Since joining Finastra in 2005, he has held roles with responsibility for driving successful trade services implementation across India, the Middle East, and Africa, as well as providing technology and business insights on sales engagement. He now provides executive advisory regarding market trends and technology transformation across all areas of corporate banking on a global basis. So welcome, Carlos. It's an absolute honor to have you on board. Well, before we begin, I would request all the attendees to all the questions that you're put them in the Q&A tab, and Carlos will answer them at the end of the session. Carlos, I would request you to please start your session. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Carlos Teixeira, and I'm leading globally Finastra from innovation within corporate banking. And what a great time to be talking about open banking and how we see banks transforming from a bank into a digital powerhouse. But it's always important to understand open banking and, more importantly, where we are, where do we stand. And the reality is that open banking looks like our shops during a pandemic lockdown. Actually, all the banks are closed from an open banking perspective. And it's important to understand why is this. It's important to understand what is being done in order to address that and how banks, the regulator, fintechs, and software powerhouses like Finastra are coming together in order to address this. And based on that, back in the beginning of this year, Finastra led a survey focusing specifically around open banking and collaboration. And it was interesting that within the framework of the banks that we were approaching and now looking into the lens of the Gulf specifically, so the GCC countries, we ask ourselves, so why is it stopping banks from going open? Why this is not taking the drive that is pushed by the Europe, where it all started with the PSD2 initiative, allowing third-party systems to connect with the banks through open banking platforms. And it was interesting to understand that within the framework of our questionnaire, where we look in one side for what stopped us beyond technology, they foresee that actually it was around the standardization of best practices. It was the regulator. Why the regulator is not pushing this forward, putting the framework together. 69% believes that if we are able to address that, banks in the region can be much more open. But we can also forget also the technology side. And the reality is that we still see a lot of banks relying on legacy infrastructure. that today stops them from leveraging open banking, open API technology. And while talking about open API technology, it's actually interesting to see that in the same survey, when we asked them, so where do you go from here? Where do you want to um, invest on the next 12 months? And astounding 86% of the banks, they realize that actually within the next 12 months, I want to embrace open banking capabilities by rolling out and leveraging open API as a standard. And whenever we look to this and keeping in mind that open banking providing the business flow, open API providing the pluggable technology to feed this business flow, it's interesting to see going back since 2019, the effort being done by the regulator. A regulator that, if you go back in time, you realize that it all started in Bahrain. Bahrain, with the release in 2019 of the Terabyte Gateway, now embraced by National Bank of Bahrain, they've started this movement. They pushed forward future, and in such a great time, even before we knew that the whole pandemic was arriving, and the crying out from our customers or your customers for digital footprint was so much in the need. And immediately they will follow by other countries like UAE, Kuwait, Egypt, and so on and so forth. And in the end of 2019, now zooming into Saudi Arabia specific, they took a step forward as well by releasing the FinTech Saudi. A FinTech Saudi where today looks into how we can help banks to be innovative into the open banking space, but in parallel, they drove other initiatives like the ESAL, like the electronic guarantees, and so on and so forth. And while we have all this technology movement and new standards being adopted, we cannot forget the past. We cannot forget the journey that every single bank went through before arriving to where they are today. And it all started in the journey that banks embraced many years ago of how they wanted to deliver financial services. Who doesn't remember the build phase where all the banks were creating their own powerhouse, their own standards, their own metrics within their space in order to provide the service specific tailored for their customers, for their business. And as the banks progressed in the maturity, they actually realized that I actually don't need to invest so much in building what I need. I can embrace products and solutions from the best of breed to the best of breath. Companies like Finastra providing these as out of the box as standards, embracing technology, but beyond that, embracing the regulatory changes delivered as standard in the platform, being SWIFT, being UCP, being payment standards, so that the banks can focus in what they are good at it, which is running their business. And then we saw a massive move in the recent years, pushed by the open banking, pushed by the open technology, to a collaboration world, where banks start talking about platforms, where fintechs like Finastra are looking to collaborate across platforms, creating a marketplace so that can be monetized from a bank side, from a fintech side, from a corporate side. And the first question that you need to ask yourself is, where do you stand in this journey? The closer you are to the left side of the screen, the far away you are from open banking. The closer you are to the right side, the easier it is for you to start leveraging new technology and new ways of doing business. And with that in mind, with new ways of doing business, with new ways of innovating the way you service your customers, Finastra started investing many years ago in a platform that their main focus is on innovation through collaboration, where we understand where customers that we have in our portfolio sit from a journey perspective on technology, but doesn't stop them from embracing new technologies, allowing them to provide the open APIs that are needed through our platform, fusionfabric.cloud, connecting to the open banking standards being rolled out by the regulators, being embraced by the fintechs, allowing you to leverage your in-house development system, independent vendors, SIs, universities, or even fintechs to enrich your experience, your insights, you reach your automation around the services that you provide to your customers. All about data. We keep on looking to data, and data is the real value that a bank holds today. What you do with your data will differentiate the way you service your customers, will differentiate the way you actually monetize the value of your investment. And allowing you to leverage all that will allow you to connect to easily to fintechs, where on the right side you have the bank as a consumer and a fintech as a producer, where they can inject innovation to you straight into your workflow so that you can leverage that specific innovation that differentiates you from the market, allowing you to have a direct exchange of value. At any given time, you can enrich the data that you have with a different way of servicing a customer. And this is what open banking is allowing, leveraged by open API technology, allowing you to expose services and have fintechs that will pick up that data and feed back to you with an algorithm in top of it, leveraging machine learning or AI to prevent you, or in this case, to predict where this customer habit is going. And of course, that all of this being delivered through multiple layers, being just for purely API on the top left, but also looking to the messaging framework, looking into the services APIs on the bottom right, or the data platform. Everything in a single place so that you can leverage technology to embrace open banking, to embrace the new ways of servicing your customers, to embrace collaboration. And whenever I talk about collaboration and we talk about how fast banks are adopting the collaborative world of working with fintechs, so moving away from the mode that it was 2 years ago, where fintechs were seen as competition to banks, we are so far from that. Fintechs today work side by side with banks, and they are there to help banks to provide a better service to their customers, to enrich their experience by leveraging technology via Open API. And indeed, whenever we look to the collaboration, going back to our survey, it was interesting to see that 89% identified collaboration as the driver for success in their business, as the driver to differentiate their business. Collaboration is undoubtedly the new innovation. A collaboration starting by open standards embraced by open banking. You need to collaborate to innovate across all your verticals, and then leverage connectivity in multiple areas, being just from a predictive analysis powered by Microsoft with Power BI and so many other vendors, but also digital onboarding like iXeed, or AI like Compend, where they are transforming and digitizing trade finance. And just in the previous session, we were hearing how many papers go around the world attached to trade finance transactions, billions every year. They are digitizing that, leveraging AI and machine learning. running compliance and UCP validation on top of it, all automated. Or conversational banking like Floatbot, or fraud prevention like NetGuardians, or extended security like Fusion Factor Manager from Finastra, and so on and so forth. The reality is that you are able to call a fintech service when you need it, when it makes sense from your workflow perspective, preparing you for tomorrow, because the reality is that it doesn't stop here. It just goes bigger and wider. Tomorrow, we expect a world of collaboration across so many points, across so many logos. I mentioned a few of them, but it's so much bigger than that. We look for transaction initiation, all the DLT space led by Marco Polo, Contour, Congo on the transaction banking or trade finance specifically space, where they are looking the way to change the way they touch the customers, to change the way they actually receive and feed back transactional data to the buyers, the sellers, and the banks, connecting all the dots. At one point, the bank will need to process it. Why not leverage open API technology and get that STP to your back office operations? All of this is possible today by leveraging Finastra technology, fusionfabric.cloud. And if I would have a last slide to give you around open banking, would be this one. Where do you stand on your open banking checklist? Have you adopted APIs internally and externally? We keep on talking about open banking and open API, which is always external, but remember, all this starts internally, in between your own systems, leveraging the connectivity across the multiple platforms that today you host in your organization. Engage, embrace fintechs, or even third-party ecosystems. I mentioned a few of them from a trade finance perspective, but there are so many more. And Finastra is exploring all of them. So we can break we can close the gap between you and them by delivering the integration out of the box. Monetize the data assets. Data is the new dollar. That's the reality. You need to be able to monetize it. Adopt new data, new models around data. Forecast revenues in the next 3 years. You have all that data. You understand where you are. More importantly, you can anticipate where you're going. Launch database transformation. We keep on talking about digital transformation. We keep on talking about the banking transformation. Think about database transformation, improving your data infrastructure, data discovery, cleaning your data, making it much more accurate. And then ongoing and evolving state of innovation. Establish a business innovation and digital transformation team, someone that focus mainly on this area, and then budget it. Provide them the necessary funds for them to be able to run. Because the reality is, going back to a word of, in this case, a new world, the big fish eats the small fish. It's not the reality. In innovation is actually the fast fish that eats the slow fish. And by leveraging the right technology, by leveraging the right platforms, you will be able to innovate and to leapfrog competition, allowing you to, as a small fish, to eat the big fish. My name is Carlos Teixeira, and for me, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. Please reach out with questions if necessary. I'll be here during the whole day to answer when necessary.
And we
My
have
team.
questions.
Fantastic.
So I'm just going to tell you them. The first question would be, using the retail banking data, are there any predictive features in Finastra's Fusion Fabric Cloud that helps in quick recommendation of new products accordingly?
So if we look to digital transformation and innovation from a fintech's perspective, it's interesting to see that actually every single movement started from the retail space, because it's much more adopted from a fintech area. We do have few fintechs that they are able to look into the data that you have in house. And I think about Active AI, Floatbot, or even IXC, where they are able to predict and propose products based on the data and based on the algorithm of your customers in terms of their buying habits. These are things that we today leverage fintechs to provide back to our customers for them to wrap services around that.
There's one more question. In a bank's partner ecosystem, there is a lot of data sharing that happens between bank and its technology partners. How to ensure this mode of data sharing for banks' innovation purpose is more secure?
So whenever we think about data, and especially on the banking sector, we need to think about the regulator and the data jurisdiction that it's pertained, because today the data, especially if we look to the regulator in the Gulf, right, it's driven by the bank. Europe has changed that to the GDRP rollout, that they've allowed the user or the consumer to allow people to have access to their data. We are still a bit far from that. But what we have seen and foresee is that actually we allow customers to host the data within their infrastructure or within a private cloud. And whenever we make the calls, we are able to provide just the necessary data from a habit perspective without sharing that specific data that is that is pertaining to an individual or to an organization. And that fintech is able to come back with predictions based on the data it receives for individual XYZ. They don't know who's sitting behind. What they know is that XYZ has invested in certain areas or has bought certain articles out of the local supermarket.
Well, one last question. I know we're short on time, but I think we should take this one more question. Good reference quote on fast fish and slow fish. What are the risks associated with open platform migration by banks?
That's a great question, and Varsha, thank you for picking it up. Um, if you look to innovation, innovation is all about fail fast, right? There are risks that sometimes are envisaged, and innovation is all about how can I transform the way I service my customer with the lowest risk possible. And the first level from a risks perspective is actually getting the regulator aligned, getting the regulator providing the necessary standards for innovative-led initiatives are able to be aligned with those standards. And you will realize that actually some of those are started by the bank side, going to the regulator to say, now you need to regulate this from that perspective. There is a lot of frameworks put in place from a design innovation-led activities, which allows you to have the necessary streams and reiterations within your innovation profiles to catch those risks ahead of time. The reality is that there will be always a measurement in terms is it an 80-20 rule? Is it a 90-10 rule? Where do you stop? And the more you have the regulator on your side, the smaller the risk will become. And those are things that we work alongside with our customers to help them on that risk mitigation.
All right, thank you so much, Carlos. I think it was an amazing session. It's an absolute honor to have you on board, and thank you to all the attendees for joining the session. I hope you had a great time. What I would request all the attendees to please join in at the next session. It's live. It's going to start at 12:15. Request you all to please join the next session. It has already started. I will see you all there. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Varsha. Thank you, all the team.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Oh, it's 12. I'm sorry, I'll have to say it again. It's 12:35. The next session starts at 12:35. My apologies. Thank you. Bye-bye.